Hi, we're looking at Song of Solomon. I want to look just at verses 5 and 6 today. Okay, here's the passage. It says, I am black but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I'm swarthy, for the sun has burned me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me caretaker of the vineyards, but I have not taken care of my own vineyard. This is a little song sort of independent of all the rest, but these songs are put together in an order which makes sense. And this gives us sort of the backstory of the woman in the book. So let's start with talking about I'm black, and then we're going to talk about but lovely, and then we're going to talk about I've not taken care of my own vineyard, and then finally how this sets up the love story. So first of all, when she says I'm black but lovely, you can't help wonder when you read that if this is partly a racial thing, if it means she was black because of her race. And the answer is no. In this context, that's not what this is talking about. Now, I think it has application in the US for us, given our history of racism. I think it can apply to that, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. But for now, set aside the racial question. She's not black, she's not dark-skinned because of her race. She's dark-skinned because she's been out in the sun. That's what she says. Don't stare at me because I'm swarthy, for the sun has burned me. My mother's sons made me caretaker of the vineyards. I had to work as a laborer. I had to work out in the sun day after day, and my skin is tanned or maybe even weather beaten. I became darker skinned because of that. Now, the reason this is significant is that she's talking to the daughters of Jerusalem, who are either Solomon's harem or at least maybe very upper class ladies in Jerusalem. And presumably in those days, one of the cultural standards was that beautiful women were pale. And because they weren't out in the sun, they pampered themselves and shielded themselves from the rays of the sun, and they were paler than that. And so because she's been out working in the sun and is more tanned in those days, that made her less beautiful by society's standards. So she's saying, but she says, but I'm black but lovely. I am beautiful, she says. Daughters of Jerusalem, you're used to thinking of the upper class pampered ladies who stay hidden away from the sun, and you think that my swarthiness, my being burned by the sun somehow makes me less attractive, but that's not true. She says, I'm beautiful just as much. Even though you think of me as less attractive in terms of your artificial standards of beautiful, I am completely beautiful. And she talks about the tents of Kedar and the curtains of Solomon. Now, apparently nobody knows what the tents of Kedar were like, but the curtains of Solomon would have been made of some sort of luxurious, beautiful fabric, very rich, majestic fabric. And so they would have been black in a way that was beautiful, dark in a way that was really gorgeous. And she says, I may be black, but I'm beautiful. And so that's the first lesson, is she says, look, ladies of Jerusalem, daughters of Jerusalem, your standards of beauty are misguided. You have this artificial picture of what beauty has to look like, and it has to look like your picture. And so you don't think of me as beautiful, but I am. And in that, so in that sense, it certainly applies to racism today. If we're in a country where we have a history of the racism and the slavery that's gone on in the past, and there's sort of a normal picture of what a beautiful woman looks like, and it tends to be tall, blonde, slender, and white, the sort of the supermodel. And a lot of people don't fit that. People who are shorter or just different body type, but also people who are black rather than white. And so it's an artificial standard. Nothing says that you have to be a certain color of skin to be beautiful. Nothing says you have to be a certain height to be beautiful. But we get these artificial social standards, and people can feel ugly or unattractive because they don't match the social standards of their day. And so right here, you can see when she says, I'm black but lovely, if you're a black woman and you're feeling somehow less attractive because that's how you think people see you, you can be encouraged by this. Or if you're in any other situation, man or woman, black or white or anything else, where you're feeling like the social standards of your day make people think you're somehow less attractive, this is saying, don't go by that. Go by how God has created you. Go by the things that God has made you. You can be beautiful whether or not people around you recognize it. But in this day, it wasn't about the race. It was about the class. It was about being wealthy or not. She was considered less attractive because she wasn't able to pamper herself and act as the rich did. She had to be out like a common laborer in the fields. And so she was facing prejudice not because of her race, but prejudice because of her social status, because of her class, because of her poverty. She also says, my mother's sons were angry with me. They made me caretaker of the vineyards. By angry, I don't think she means that they were thinking angry thoughts. I think she simply means that they treated me harshly. They made me work in the vineyards. They made me caretaker of the vineyards, but I'm not taking care of my own vineyard. And she doesn't mean by her own vineyard that she actually had a separate vineyard. She means herself. She means I haven't been able to take care of myself because I've been having to have these family responsibilities to help earn a livelihood with everybody else. They haven't let me focus on my own body or my own beauty or my own love life or my own happiness. She didn't have the time to focus on her own hopes and dreams and to look for the love of her life because of the world around her and because of her poverty and because of her brothers. So last time, this helps set the love story up. Last time, we set up the love story by focusing on her desire for the man and that the man was worthy of that desire. We set the love story up by saying, boy, the guy in this love story is amazing and he's really worth desiring. Here we set the love story up a little bit by giving the woman a backstory. And the backstory is that she's kind of in a predicament. She's not a rich, pampered upper class woman. She's kind of a more of an outcast than that, more of a country bumpkin or somebody who's like not got a lot to immediately claim attention. She's lovely, but nobody's noticing that she's lovely. And so that's kind of the picture here. Now, that is where I want to look for the metaphor here. Because Israel would have said, we're like this woman. They would have thought about their own status as a nation. They would have said, well, we seem like a little nation among all the others compared to Babylon, Assyria, and Egypt, and all these mighty nations with all their military and all their artistic stuff and all their great achievements and all their gods. And we seem like this little country, but Jehovah cares for us. And he's seen the beauty in us that nobody else sees. And he notices that there's a value to us that nobody else has found. And so they're thinking that they're like this woman. I wonder how many of them were thinking of their origins in Egypt, that they started life as a nation basically as slaves to another nation, as slaves to other gods. And then Jehovah called them out so that they could become his people and he could become their God. I wonder if when they saw my brothers were angry with me and made me work in the vineyards, if they thought of Joseph's brothers who were angry with him and made him and sold him into slavery in Egypt. And the whole nation eventually followed him into Egypt. It was serving as slaves and would have been swarthy under the sun and would have had no chance to work on their greatness as a nation. They were kept underfoot as a nation. They couldn't grow and become famous and amazing and culturally advanced because they were just surviving day to day. And yet God pulled them out, brought them into their own land, gave them their own country, their own land, and made them a people with real value. He saw the value in them when nobody else would, because he valued them. So I think they were probably thinking that they were like this woman. And Ruth is another picture of this. The book of Ruth is about a woman who, she was a good woman, but through no fault of her own, she had no way to gain anybody's attention or claim anything. In that society, she was an outcast. In that society, she had shame. In that society, she had no honor. Because just, again, not her fault, no fault of her own, but it wasn't anything she could do for herself. It took a kinsman redeemer. It took Boaz to make her his wife and to grant her honor, to bring her back into the community in a position of honor, because he saw the value in her when nobody else did. And so Israel would have been thinking, Ruth is like this woman, and we are like this woman in the sight of the world, but God has given us a value. God has made us valuable. And the same thing is true for us. We are like this woman. For example, in 1 Peter, it says, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession. This is talking of the church. This is amazing. We, like Israel, are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. This is lovely. But then he says, you once were not a people, but now you're the people of God. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. We didn't earn this for ourselves or achieve it for ourselves. God reached down and pulled us out of our predicament and brought us from being outcasts to being an honored nation in his sight. And that's kind of the picture here. So that's the metaphor for this piece, is that God loves us and bails us out of our predicament and brings us into a place of honor because of his love for us, just like the woman in this love story is going to have happen to her. Okay, thanks. See you next week.